We continue to track the aftermath and reaction to the discovery of what appears to be mass graves and civilian killings in Bucha, Ukraine. And a warning, some of the images are graphic. A Human Rights Watch investigator is on the scene, gathering evidence of potential war crimes. Ukrainian officials say more than 300 people have been killed in Bucha. This includes children and seniors. Human Rights Watch says it has documented apparent war crimes in other Ukrainian cities under Russian control, including Chernihiv and Kharkiv. For more on this, our Chase team has reached Hugh Williamson in Berlin. He is Europe and Central Asia Director at Human Rights Watch. And I should warn you again, some of the details Hugh might relay are graphic in nature. And why don't we get to those stories, Hugh? Walk me through the accounts, the trauma your team has been hearing about and gathering on the ground in Ukraine.
Thank you for having me on the program. In our most recent report, we documented several cases of executions by Russian soldiers of Ukrainian citizens. In one case in Bucha, we documented the case of Russian soldiers taking out 5 men and getting them to kneel on the ground in a public street, half strip off their jackets and boots. They had to put their T-shirts over their head, and then the soldier simply shot one of them in the back of the head. We have evidence of Russian soldiers further east gathering 6 men from different bunkers and taking them out into a meadow near the town and shooting them also at short range. Really terrible, the most gruesome accounts. And then another gruesome account of a woman who described to us of being raped multiple times by a Russian soldier in a school building in eastern Ukraine. A really traumatic experience for her, obviously. We take very much care in gathering these interviews with witnesses and victims to try to care for them and not re-traumatize them, ensure they have medical help, psychological help as well. But we think it's important, and often they tell us it's important, just quickly, for their accounts to be made public. So
I know you've been, gathering these stories, in March and now most recently from Bucha. Is there a pattern you're seeing?
Exactly. So these accounts were from the first half of March. And now, of course, the discovery of several hundred bodies and other alleged war crimes in Bucha. We are very concerned, essentially, that the scale of the war crimes, which we identified in early March, may have continued through March and may have continued elsewhere as well. For instance, in Mariupol, a much bigger city of 500,000 people. So we're really concerned that there could be a pattern of Russian soldiers carrying out such terrible acts of individual war crimes. We don't know. That's why we're continuing to document. That's why our researcher, as you showed in your video, was in Bucha today and in there yesterday as well. We need to find more, but we can't draw the conclusion yet that there was a massive series of war crimes in Bucha with so many bodies killed, but we want to try to document that. And of course, we welcome the fact that the Ukrainian government has also said they want to open an investigation of what's happening there.
When people recount these stories, Hugh, it's got to be, as you say, traumatizing for them once again. And then they hear Russia saying it's fake, it's all made up. How does that play into the trauma of war?
I think it makes it obviously much more difficult for the victims and the witnesses to stomach, in a sense. But for us, in a sense, it motivates us because we realize that it's important to document and to bring these testimonies to light, because it's only through facts, through documentation, through investigation, really, that we're going to be able to cut through the disinformation which Russia is evidently spreading on these issues. So we feel it's so important also for other governments to be involved in investigating as well. We welcome the fact that the US and European Union are also sending investigation teams. In that way, there'll be obviously less credibility for the efforts by Russia to disinform.
Mm-hmm. Today, the president of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky, he addressed the United Nations Security Council virtually, because they were gathering, of course, at headquarters in New York. But then he added, and basically he said, do your job, keep the peace. And then he added this video, which was graphic. How do these stories that you're gathering, what's the end goal here? To do what, and with what teeth?
So the end goal is to gather evidence of violations of the laws of war, the Geneva Conventions on both sides. By the way, we've also documented abuse by Ukraine of prisoners of war from Russia. That's important to note as well. Build up the evidence, in a sense, if we have to do so, if there are violations, and to then encourage official sources. Russia should do it, Ukraine should do it, and things like the International Criminal Court should build up a case that can persuade a court of law that war crimes have taken place. And if that is the case, then those who are, where the evidence suggests, should be found guilty. And those senior military figures, soldiers, should be tried in the court of law and sentenced appropriately.
One final question for you. For your team on the ground, and when you're trying to interview somebody about what happened to them, how difficult is that in itself?
It's difficult for my team, absolutely. They go through special training for these sorts of work, resilience and other sorts of training to prepare them for this sort of work. But I think, it's obviously much more difficult for the people we're interviewing. And we take our hats off, in a sense, for the people who are ready under the most difficult circumstances to talk to us and to share their stories. Every person has a story to tell. Every victim has a story to tell as well. And it's our job